If you want to go beyond the rink and into the dressing room, there's only one place to be, the Hockeyverse, with your hosts, Michael Trakos and Johnny Legend.
All right, let's get into this. In what is looking like another back-and-forth series of blowout wins, does anyone really know what to expect out of Game 3 between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning? Well, there is one constant. Andrei Vasilevskiy looks human. Yeah, the guy who is considered the quote-unquote best goalie in the world hasn't been the best goalie in these playoffs. The way the Leafs have been pumping goals by him, he's looking more like some Friday night beer league goalie. In Game 1, Vasi gave up 3 goals. In Game 2, he refused to be pulled and ended up on the hook for 7 goals. That's 10 goals in 2 games. And lest you think this is some small sample size, consider this. Going back to last year's playoffs, the Leafs have scored now 32 goals in 9 games against the Vezina Trophy winner. That works out to be about 3.55 goals per game. 3.55. And it's nearly a goal more than what he averaged during the regular season. Then again, it shouldn't be surprising. Vasi had a 3.06 goals against average against the Leafs this year. So while the Leafs can expect that Tampa will punch back and that Vasi will probably be a lot better than he was in Game 2, they should also be confident that they can put goals by him, like a lot of them. And as long as Samsonov can hold Tampa to under 3 goals per game, which, again, is no small feat, the Leafs still hold the edge in the series, and they hold the edge in net. At least we think they do. Agree, disagree? Well, we'll dig into that and more on our post-game reaction episode of the Hockeyverse.
You just found the world's latest and greatest sports, entertainment, and hockey podcast. This is the Hockeyverse. On today's episode, we recap Game 2 between the Leafs and the Lightning, and we look ahead to what is now a best-of-5 series, with both teams heading to Tampa. By the way, check out our show notes for timestamps if you want to fast forward to your favorite part. Also, if you want to be on an episode like this one, email your questions to heyhockeyverse@gmail.com. Now it's off to Tampa Bay for Game 3. Let's go.
Hell of a bounce-back game in Game 2 there, Johnny.
Beautiful, beautiful game.
So, Toronto crapped the bed in Game 1. Mm-hmm. You could argue that Tampa crapped the bed in Game 2, or Toronto just answered back. But do we know what to expect in Game 3?
I think you can expect that Tampa Bay is going to come out on fire. So the Leafs got to be ready for that. But I think if they play like they played tonight, they'll be just fine.
So Victor Hedman, I'm going to guess he's going to be playing in Game 3. And I think that was a big, big difference maker for the Lightning. Not having Hedman, not having Eric Chernak, both out with injuries, both sustained in Game 1. At the same time, I don't care who's healthy or not on Tampa Bay's roster. The way that John Tavares played, the way that Mitch Marner played, William Nylander, Morgan Riley, go down the list. The best players for the Leafs were the best players in that game, and that is a recipe for success, whether you're playing Tampa, whether you're playing Colorado, Edmonton, New York, whoever. If the Toronto Maple Leafs get that sort of play out of their star players, this is a team that could probably win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, 100%. And they came out and they didn't let Tampa push them around, and that was the main thing, right? Took Corey Perry right out of the equation, took Pat Maroon right out of the equation just by scoring that goal 40 seconds in.
And we talked about Mark Giordano in Game 1, how, un-Mark Giordano he was. Like, this guy is a rock on defense, and the reason the Leafs got him is because of that veteran presence, and he's been there, done that. He looked awful in Game 1, as did everyone, but Mark Giordano particularly looked like a guy who, never mind the playoff experience, he looked like a guy who'd never been in the playoffs. And Game 2, he's dropping the gloves, he's fighting Zach Bogosian, really set a tone in my mind. How did you think that really played for the rest of the game?
Oh, that was huge. He was throwing punches with everything he had, and he landed them too, because Zach Bogosian is a gorilla.
Yeah, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight Zach Bogosian.
No.
I don't want to fight Tanner Jeannot, and I probably don't want to fight Corey Perry. And the Leafs, engaged in fights with all 3 guys.
Mm-hmm. So, and how about Connor Jeannot after getting tuned up by Luke Schenn? Didn't even look like he had a mark on his face. What's he made out of?
Well, he had marks on his knuckles.
Yeah, his knuckles were toast, but
and Schenn left the ice to get repairs, and good on Shen for standing in there and delivering some nasty left hooks. I'm with you, though. Jeannot didn't look like he'd even got into a fight if you just look at his face.
Yeah, and then he was going to fight Yellow Shirt Guy looking for Curious George there in the crowd.
Yeah, Yellow Hoodie Guy is now the new... Is he the new dart guy, you said?
The new dart guy.
I love it.
I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the fans will embrace Yellow Shirt Guy, or they're kind of embarrassed of him?
I'm embarrassed of him. But that's just me. I get it. You're passionate. You're at a game. You get a little pops in you, and you think you're invincible, and now you're going to fight like the toughest guy in the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, buddy, where's your brain at?
Well, if you look back, even to go back to the New Jersey game when the fans littered the ice with beer cans, and then in Edmonton, and now fans are trying to get in the face of guys in the penalty, but what's going on? There used to be a huge separation between the fans and the game. Now it seems like the fans want to get into the game.
It's COVID, man. We watched hockey in a bubble for 2 years. Now This is they're fans are allowed back out, and they're spending I don't know how much tickets are going for, but they're ridiculous. And that's the other thing. You get this Yellow Hoodie Guy got kicked out of the game. How does that even happen?
Well, not just that. Those are $2,000 seats.
Yeah, just brainless. And what was he going to do if he could actually have got into the penalty box? Does he think that he can handle Tanner Jeannot?
You know what would have been awesome if while he was banging on the glass, they just lifted up that pane of glass in the penalty box, and he was face to face with Connor Jeannot.
Yeah, would have been like Ty Domi that time in Philly.
Yeah, I would have paid $2,000 just to see the look on his face.
Oh man. Well, then he's filing a lawsuit and trying to take all of Tanner Jeannot's money, right? All right, so we got to talk about John Tavares.
Oh, Johnny T.
You can make the argument that this guy is overpaid. I don't think you can make the argument that he's underrated. He is a superstar playing for the biggest market in the NHL. But is he, by Toronto standards, underappreciated, John? Because, when you go down the list of Toronto Maple Leafs and their value to the team, I don't know where Tavares ranks heading into the playoffs, but I would have had him below Matthews, Marner, Nylander, probably Riley, maybe even Samsonov. And this guy's the captain of the team. And, for game 2, he put the team on his shoulders, so to speak, and gets his first playoff hat trick. Long overdue, but that's what you expected of your captain.
Yeah, well, that's why he's the captain, right?
What do you make of John Tavares? Where were you in the camp of, when he signed that deal with the Leafs, and you knew who they had, and you knew where they were going? It's not like he came there when they were just rebuilding. They were already a team on the rise, had already been to the playoffs, had lost to the Bruins. Did you think they needed him at the time, or do you think that was the right move at the time?
Yeah, because they didn't have a captain. Remember how many seasons did they have no captain? I think since Dion Phaneuf, right? Mm-hmm. So they needed a captain, and they needed a guy that was capable of captaining the team of the Hockeyverse.
Yeah,
right. And that's no short order to be the captain of the Leafs. Look at what it did to Phaneuf.
Yeah, and I don't know if John Tavares has received his due. It's a difficult one. He's not a captain in the Doug Gilmour mold or in the Wendell Clark mold. He's not going to scrap. He's not going to throw any hits. At the same time, he's not a Matt Sundin also, where on a moment's notice, Matt Sundin could just take over a game. I don't think that's John Tavares anymore. Might have been a few years ago. I think right now he has to play with good players. I don't think he can carry a line all by himself. Not to discredit him, but this was the kind of game you needed out of him. And it wasn't perimeter play. It wasn't he was scoring goals from outside of the hash marks or anything like that. He was going in the dirty areas. And full credit to him, because that's what you needed. You're going up against Andrei Vasilevskiy, and I said off the hop that Vasilevskiy hasn't looked like Vasilevskiy. Well, the Leafs are making it really difficult for him to look like Vasilevskiy because they're all over the place.
And John Tavares is a big part of that. In front of the net, he's like a master in front of the net.
Yeah, he doesn't get enough credit for going into those dirty areas. And I think below the goal line or below the hash marks, this guy is probably one of the better players in the league.
And John Tavares is John Tavares. You know exactly what he's going to do. You know exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah,
it's not going to go. It's not going to go too far below his average, and it's not going to go too far above. He's nice and steady. Point of game.
Yeah, you got to admit, yeah, he's been pretty consistent over his career.
Yeah.
At the same time, Austin Matthews now 2 games in, no goals.
2 games in, no goals. But maybe the best shot of the series so far, off the melon.
Yeah, like he doesn't beat Vasilevskiy, and I think going down the wing, we were talking about it after the first intermission, that he'd probably had nothing to shoot at. He's thinking, okay, well, the angles are all covered. I'm not going to score here. I could either put it off his pads and hope for a rebound, or maybe send a message.
Yeah, he sent him a 90-mile-an-hour text message right to his forehead.
And we were saying again, like at that time, that doesn't go in, and maybe nothing comes of it. But throughout the game, you got to think Vasilevskiy is thinking, I don't want to get hit in the head again. And does that affect his play? Because, again, 7 goals on Vasilevskiy. And I know last year he didn't look good as well. I think the Leafs pumped 5 goals past him one game, 4 goals another game. I think his average last season in that first round, aside from Game 7, he was the worst goaltender out of him and Jack Campbell. And I don't know what it is about the Leafs, but maybe it's just they got so many offensive weapons that it doesn't matter who's in net now.
Well, they figured out that you can go blocker side on him, and you can screen him.
So a little change in lines, big change actually when you think about it. Taking Ryan O'Reilly off that second line with Tavares and Nylander, throwing him on a line with Matthew Knies, who comes into the game because Michael Bunting is out with a suspension. That third line now includes O'Reilly, Achari, and Knies. I like that line. I thought they should have probably started the series with that line. Michael Bunting now is gone for 2 more games. He's not going to be available until what, game 4?
Game 4.
No, game 5.
No, he's through game 4, so game 5. Yeah, but I think
does he see the ice?
I don't think so.
I guess
not unless something happens.
Yeah, it's going to depend on like what happens. And Matthew Knies wasn't like perfect. Obviously, he took some penalties. I wouldn't really quibble with any of the calls because I thought they were. It's not like I thought some of the slashing calls were kind of ticky-tacky, but I really like Knies on that third line. I like how it's just a different look right now for the Leafs.
Those guys were buzzing around the net all night, all 3 of them. All 3 of them at the same time, crashing Vasilevskiy. That had to have an effect too, right? I mean, that's gotta weigh on. That's gotta tire him out, at the very least.
Yeah, and we talked about this also, that Michael Bunting is a UFA, and he's basically making entry-level contract money right now, which is great. Great value for a guy who scored 20 goals this year, 20 goals the year before, draws a hell of a lot of penalties. So I'm not going to say that the Leafs, that he has no value to the Leafs or anything, but he's probably not going to get signed. And he's not going to get. It's not because he's the next Nazem Kadri and he's kind of suspended his way out of the city. He's not getting signed because he's probably going to be asking for maybe $3 to $4 million, maybe even $5 million, depending on what's out there on the open market. So in my mind, he's already this was his last season in Toronto. Now that you got Knies, and now that Michael Bunting has gotten himself into some suspension trouble, I don't think that the Leafs can go back to him.
No, they got no room for him, first of all. And we immediately when he got suspended, you're like, oh, he just Nazem Kadri'd his way out of town. But then if you think about it, he Zach Hyman himself out of town.
Exactly.
Right? Nice of the Leafs to develop players for the rest of the league, though, eh?
Yeah. Well, nice of the Coyotes to develop a guy for Toronto as well. Like, I don't understand what the Coyotes were thinking and letting him go, because you see it right now. Like a guy like Michael Bunting is great to have because he just drives you crazy. But at the same time, if he's going to get himself in trouble, and I thought it was a 1-game suspension. I was surprised. Maybe 2 games, I would have been like, okay, fine, that's harsh. But a 3-game suspension is basically the equivalent of like a 6-game suspension in the regular season. I don't know if it warranted that.
Well, if we listen back to a couple episodes ago, somebody did say 3-game suspension.
Who said that? You said 3 games.
Yep.
Eh? Now, was it because Cernak was hurt? And
Yeah.
It just seemed
Yeah,
like...
I figured that the suspension would double the games that he was expected to miss, right?
So if the Leafs win, you could say like, okay, good on Michael Bunting because you took out top 4 defenseman in Cernak. At the same time, you never like to see guys hurt, but
No.
the good news for the Leafs is that you got the depth. Mm-hmm. And maybe a couple years ago, or at least when Kadri got suspended, you didn't have that depth. Kadri goes out, and you just didn't have another guy to step in and do the kind of things that Kadri could do.
No.
Bunting goes out, and now Calle Yarncrook takes his spot on the top line, and I think Calle is better suited for that spot versus a third line shutdown type of role. Mm-hmm. So I think this one actually makes a lot of sense because now you can bring in Nyes, who's another big body, goes to the net. I think he's going to make an impact, a positive impact in the next couple games, especially in Game 3 when there's so much line matching going on. I can see that O'Reilly, Nola Chari, and Matthew Nyes line being really instrumental to what the Leafs are going to be doing in terms of the line matching. So,
well, you see what happened. They shut down that Corey Perry line, and it was a totally different game.
Corey Perry, the Leaf killer.
Yep.
That's a guy that the Leafs need to sign next summer. I don't care how old he's getting.
Yeah, just so they don't have to play against him.
Yeah, sign him and put him in the minors if you want. Just,
I mean, he's
not playing
4 years in a row he's killing the Leafs?
Just ridiculous.
Like, he's the one that put, he was on Montreal when he put Tavares out for the playoffs,
the knee to the head. And, so last year he goes to the final, loses. The year before he goes to the final, loses again, and the year before that he goes to the final and loses. 3 straight years now he's gone to the final and lost. So it's almost like a kiss of death is having Corey Perry on your team, but at least you get to the final.
Yeah, and that's really what everybody's looking for in the Hockeyverse, right? Is a second round. See what that looks like.
Yeah.
What's it like to play hockey when it's warm outside?
It's great. It's great to cover hockey when it's warm outside.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that much. Although it is kind of weird though, going to the game in Tampa. I remember like it happened a year ago. You go to the game and you're wearing your suit and everything, and you're just sweating balls. Then you get into the arena and it's like you're going into an ice cooler, and it's like the worst feeling. Like you're soaking wet, and then all of a sudden you're freezing. Mm-hmm. So, but I'll take that over just watching on TV.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Morgan Rielly.
Yep.
Let's talk about Morgan Rielly here.
Killer game last night.
Yeah, and it looked like the Morgan Rielly of old. Mm-hmm. And he was dealing with some injuries this year. Obviously wasn't himself. I would argue that he was probably their second or third best defenseman, maybe even their fourth best defenseman by the end of it, just the way that it was shaken up and by Rielly standards. But he came out, like I said, everyone came out. Mitch Marner had a great game. Tavares had a great game. Nylander had a great game. Samsonov, go down the list. But Morgan Rielly, 4 assists. If he can play like that, that is a huge, huge benefit for the Leafs because they really don't have a Cale Makar. They don't have an Adam Fox. They don't have that quote-unquote stud number 1D. The closest they have is Rielly, and he's never going to confuse himself for a Cale Makar, but when he's at his best, he's playing himself onto a Team Canada roster and some Norris Trophy consideration, and we saw it last night. Like, this guy is a guy who flipped a switch and was back to his old self.
Yeah, I think having Luke Shen as his partner really helps because he knows that that he can pinch, he can go in, he can do some extra stuff, and Luke Shen's going to be solid back there. He's going to play his position. He's going to do what he's supposed to do. He's not going to get cute and hang Morgan out to dry, so he can be a little bit more creative, right?
Were you surprised that Sheldon Keefe didn't make any changes to the back end? Because they changed some stuff up front, and I think a lot of us were wondering, does Hall go out in exchange for Liljegren? You were mentioning Eric Gustafsson is also in the press box right now. There's 2 options there. The defense was just atrocious, whether it was Jake McCabe or Giordano in Game 1, Hall in Game 1. Really only the guys that were looking good in Game 1 were probably Shen and Rielly. Mm-hmm. Were you surprised that Keefe just rolled out the same 6 guys?
Well, I did initially say that because Hall had a horrible game, but the thing was everybody had a horrible game, and you can't change all 4 of them. So maybe he was just thinking, you know what, let's see what happens this game. And if I can single somebody out, they're out, right? But everybody played awesome in the second game. Even Hall got into it with Corey Perry, which was probably not the best decision for his the future of the look of his face, but he got through it.
Yeah, and I just like the balance. Like you mentioned, the Shen-Rielly balance where you've got one guy who moves the puck and can skate up the ice, and the other guy who is just going to be hanging back the whole time. And I think Hall, who is it? Is it Hall Giordano?
Yeah.
That's one where actually I could see Liljegren replacing Hall just because then you have the puck mover with the stay-at-home guy. And but at the same time, Hall's killing penalties.
Yeah, and I don't think he wanted to sacrifice the solid defense for another freewheeler, right?
We're talking solid defense and Hall in the same sentence here?
Well, I mean, better than having a guy trapped. At least he can fall down and get in the way.
There were a lot of people like just losing their minds over Liljegren not being there. It reminds me of the whole when Jake Gardner was in the lineup and we saw those hashtags free Jake Gardner, because Liljegren's he's a first round pick. I thought he was looking great last year, and this year he was looking good up until a point, and then the Leafs got all these guys on the back end, and all of a sudden Liljegren's odd man out, and I still think he's going to play in these playoffs. It might take one more loss, but yeah, the fact that Toronto has 8 NHL caliber defensemen, trust me, I think you're going to see all 8 of them at some point during these playoffs. Yeah, especially if Toronto goes deep.
You can't make it. I think the most surprising thing is that that's 2 games and nobody's got hurt yet.
You knocking on wood here? Or?
I'm knocking on wood.
There you go. Yeah, and it's 2 games no one's got hurt, and it's 2 games where Vasilevskiy is looking like not Vasilevskiy. I don't know what to say about him.
We kind of mentioned that, though. Remember, I talked about it in a few podcasts ago that Vasilevsky's not really the Vasilevskiy of old.
He didn't scare you going into the series.
No, because the Leafs got him figured out, like you said. How many goals in the last 2 years?
A lot of
goals.
Right,
30 goals, 30-something goals. So, and probably more than anybody else in that amount of games.
When you're talking about a guy who's gone to 3 straight Cup finals and he's basically against the Leafs, he's averaging 3.5 goals per game. Something doesn't make sense there.
Mm-hmm. And he's only like, 4 wins off the all-time playoff wins record for a goalie behind Brodeur there?
And refuses to leave games. Like that was where someone was saying is John Cooper, does he even have control of this team if he's not allowed to pull Vasilevskiy out? And I think that's kind of like a weird comment to make, because I'm sorry, the reason why Vasilevskiy is a number 1 and the best goalie in the world, and he's still the best goalie in the world. I don't care what Toronto's doing against him. I'm sorry, like this guy's still top dog. The reason why is because he wants to be in the net. He wants to battle, and whether he lets in 4 goals, 5 goals, or 7 goals, or however many goals, he doesn't want to leave the net, and he wants to continue to be there. And that's the scary thing, is the fact that Leafs pumped 7 goals on him, and he got humiliated, embarrassed, and he's going to be pissed off going into Game 3. So
even when it was 6-1, he was still making highlight saves, right?
Yeah, there was no quit.
And he didn't let in, I don't remember seeing a bad goal.
No softies.
No, everything was earned.
So that's the positive if you're a Leaf fan, is that you're getting to Vasilevskiy, and it's not because Vasilevskiy is playing poorly. It's just that the offense is just so good. Like we see the shot from Marner. He waits for the D to provide his own screen against Vasilevskiy. We saw the shots from Nylander. Again, just patience and just putting it in the right spot. So, you nailed it right there, Johnny. It's just like this Toronto team can score in bunches, and they can make a guy like Vasilevskiy look very ordinary.
But now we've also seen in 2 games in a row, 1 for each team, how important a quick goal.
Yeah.
How important a quick goal is in a playoff game.
So what are you expecting out of Game 3? Like, what's the feeling like? Do you think it's going to go a little back and forth here? Like we saw 7-3 Game 1 for Tampa, 7-2 Game 2 for Toronto. Is it going back? Is this going to be one of those seesaw series where, one team blows out the other and this take turns, or are we going to see more of is this the 1-0, 2-1 kind of grind?
That's what I think. I think the next game, I think both teams have figured out, holy crap, we're in the playoffs now. And they all know it now.
Boring hockey.
Yeah. They're going to be fighting everybody's going to be fighting for every inch they can get in Game 3.
I think you're right. I think Game 3 is just going to be, like I said, it's going to be a defensive game.
I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to overtime.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's no penalties. Yeah, overtime, maybe a double overtime. But this one could be the one where you're going, geez, Game 3 was the one where that was the series-defining game there.
Mm-hmm. Well, how about call a penalty on Kucherov? Like, can he do no wrong or what?
I love Kucherov. He laid out Mitch Marner with a hit. Like, I love to see that out of a star player that you just don't expect to be throwing like hits. And I think Marner was a little surprised because normally he can evade that kind of stuff. And I think he saw Kucherov. He's like, oh, he's probably going for a puck. And then all of a sudden he just lowers the boom.
Well, when Matthews had that monster collision, who do you think was more surprised, Matthews or the guy he hit?
Yeah, well, Matthews, he does do that, though. Like, you look at the numbers this year, I think he was number 1 or 2 on the team in hits.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, no, Shen was number 1 in the league.
Well, okay, well, this is prior to Shen going on the team, because Shen spent most of his the year in Vancouver. But, yes, I don't know how they measure hits. I think, actually, I was talking to a guy at the NHL who does stats, and he says a hit is technically if you stop the forward momentum of the puck carrier.
Well, that's what it's
just
designed.
basically getting in the way of him.
That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be separating the player from the puck, right?
Yeah. And usually you think separating the player from the puck, you think of Wendell Clark taking a guy's head off or Scott Stevens or something. But it can be as simple of, hey, I just stepped in front of you almost like a basketball, like a block or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those guys, they didn't just separate you from the puck. They separated you from your senses.
Yeah, so players are getting a little smarter now. They just, as long as they get in the way of a lane, it's considered a hit. But, yeah, I think we're in for a nasty series, like 3 fights in game 2. Obviously, the scoreboard dictated a lot of the rough stuff, but now might be a time to kind of say to Wayne Simmons, hey, warm up there, bud, because we might need you.
Well, I saw Don Cherry posted a tweet after game 1. Picture of Wayne Simmons, said, where's this guy?
Yeah, and you know what? They didn't have Wayne Simmons, but they had the spirit of Wayne Simmons in game 2 because, like you said, the fact that Justin Hall was dropping it with Corey Perry, Shen dropping it, with Tanner Jeannot and Giordano and Bogosian. Again, Bogosian is not an easy customer to face.
They didn't pick their spots yesterday, did they?
No, they weren't fighting like Hagel or something like that.
Let's go grab 3 of the toughest guys on the team and fight them.
Well, I can't wait for game 3. And, you got to have to come back to the Hockeyverse. We're going to be talking about it. We're going to be talking about the whole series here. So thanks again for listening into the Hockeyverse for this post-game recap of Game 2 and a look ahead to Game 3. As always, you can check out thehockeyverse.com for the latest stories on the Leafs, the league, and more. While you're there, sign up for the newsletter. It's free. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm at Michael_Trikos, minus the blue checkmark. Thanks, Elon. And Johnny is at I'm Johnny Legend. I always say I am, like A. There's no A in there.
That was the one I got locked out of.
Yeah, so
15 years old. I couldn't get in.
So Johnny's at I'm Johnny Legend. And for Johnny Legend, I'm Michael Trikos. And until next time, see you at the rink.
Thank you for listening to the Hockeyverse. If you enjoyed this show, please share the love by leaving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes and by introducing the Hockeyverse to your friends and family. Also, be sure to check out thehockeyverse.com. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter. It's specifically written for you, the diehard hockey fan. From insider news to opinion and analysis, our NHL-focused newsletter will entertain and equip you for the conversations of the day. We thank you for your support, and until next time, this is the Hockeyverse.